Welcome to the Quality Meat Scotland podcast. Industry updates and best practice to promote, support, develop and protect the Scottish red meat sector.
Hello and thanks for downloading this. I'm Mark Stephen. In this series of QMS podcasts, we're looking back at monitor farm projects around Scotland and asking what we can learn from them. Today, I'm joined by Ed Rowell from Huntleshope Farm in Peeblesshire. Now, aside from being a qualified vet, Kate is also the current chair of Quality Meat Scotland and a fifth-generation farmer. She and her husband run a hill and upland farm near Peebles in the Scottish borders. Poppy Frater is a sheep and grassland specialist at SAC Consulting. Poppy is an expert in sheep nutrition, flock performance and grassland management. She's also in the process of completing a PhD, which is entitled, Is Mob Grazing Beneficial to the Soil Health and Environment? It's an excellent question, and we'll maybe get her to answer that before the end of the podcast. So, first off, welcome to you both. Thanks very much for agreeing to do this.
Afternoon.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, no bother at all. No bother at all. Kate, just for a start, tell me a bit more about Huntleshope.
So it's an upland farm just south of Peebles. We've got about 750 hectares. It's a tenanted farm, and the family have been on the estate for over 150 years now, so we've got quite deep roots here. The steading and the low ground sits at about 800 feet, and the hills go kind of straight up at the back to about 2,200. So we always joke that we have some of the best lowland ground or flat ground in Peeblesshire, but the very worst hill.
Well, as long as you know what you've got, that's the important thing, I suppose. Why did you choose to get involved in the Monitor Farm project?
My husband and I came back and took over from my parents in 2003, and we went along to the local Agricultural Discussion Society group, which I've been going to for a long time. And Rob Livesley was there, and he was the very first monitor farmer in Scotland. And he talked about his experience as a monitor farmer. And that really sort of lit a light bulb in my head. I just thought it sounded really interesting, really exciting. So when the opportunity came along to pick up Peeblesshire monitor farm, I kind of dragged my husband kicking and screaming to the application process, and we applied and were chosen.
Was there a particular problem you were trying to address or that you wanted to look into?
We were at a sort of crossroads. My dad had done what he'd always done for a long time, and we'd just taken over, and we just wanted to make sure that everything we were doing was right. I mean, we knew it probably wasn't, but we just wanted to have a look at the whole business. We were open to new ideas. I, in particular, wanted to look at if we could make the hill land any more productive than what it was. Ed was quite keen on looking at grassland and just looking at the whole general productivity of the farm to see if there was anything else we could be doing.
Poppy, what was your role in this?
It was actually before my time at SAC, so I've just got involved latterly. It was my predecessor, John Vipond, who had quite a big role, didn't he, Kate? And he kind of trained me up, so I cover the same topics in terms of new nutrition and grassland management.
John came along and took us all by the scruff of the neck and gave us a good shake, the whole community group for the monitor farm. I do remember the first time he was there, and the things he was saying were over the heads of pretty much everybody that was there, but he kind of took a couple of steps back and started from the basics again, and he really made an impact on all of us.
Tell me about the Neolac trial.
We maybe need to go back to the soya trial that we did when we were actually monitor farmers. One of John's pieces of research was to change the feeding of pregnant ewes in the run-up to lambing time. So he was advocating using a much more kind of natural diet of just silage, very good quality silage, and adding protein in the last 3 or 4 weeks of pregnancy to make that up to the protein needs of the ewe. So what he was quite keen to do was to trial that diet against a diet of protected soya. The product we used was called Sopralin. And that was to do the same thing, but you used less of it, and it was therefore cheaper. So we did the trial. He set up all the trial with us back in, I think it was 2013, and we used soya and good quality silage versus Sopralin and good quality silage. And we discovered that both of them worked really well, basically, for what we needed. And that had changed our feeding regime hugely, because we used to feed before that barley. We used to feed it twice a day in the run-up to lambing. It was great big sackfuls that you were carrying up and down. Then we would usually use hay rather than silage. So it was a complete change of the diet for us. And what we found was it saved money, it saved labour immensely, because we were taking a very small bucket of Sopralin out, literally 2 or 3 kilos, in place of these great big bags of barley. So even the kids could do it. And it just worked really, really well. The pens were cleaner. We didn't have as much problem with sheep scouring. All the lambs were healthy. It just all worked really well. And it really revolutionised our feeding system before lambing time, actually.
Why does it work as well as it does, Poppy?
So the main thing there is the production of really good quality silage. If you think about a ewe in late pregnancy, her rumen size is decreasing. So therefore, the feed that she gets must be really energy and protein dense. So with silage as the basis of, or hay is the basis of many rations, making sure each bite that she gets is really good quality and will be beneficial to make sure she gets the energy and the protein she needs. And when you do make good quality silage, you don't have to supplement it with as much sort of starchy energy feeds. So Kate was upwards of 11 ME, megajoules of energy per kilo of dry matter. Was making that sort of silage, and the one I've got in front of me is 14% crude protein. So when you've got that, you can just be really targeted in terms of what other supplements you feed alongside it. So it's a much healthier ration. As soon as we start adding starchy supplements into that ration, we're affecting the rumen pH. And that makes the sheep less able to get the energy she requires from the fibre. So therefore, it's much more healthy. The soya was providing what's called DUP, digestible undegradable protein. And it's a good quality protein because some of it bypasses the rumen and is absorbed in the intestine. So it's absorbed more efficiently. The rumen is fueled by microbes to extract the protein. So if we can bypass that stage and it's absorbed directly, it's less of an energy cost to the ewe.
And when you were on this regime, Kate, how did the animals look? I mean, were they thriving? Were they behaving well? What was going on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it took them, 2 feeds to get used to the soya, which they hadn't had before. And then after that, they absolutely lapped it up. The interesting thing that we noticed was because it was a much more natural diet. So the key thing is with the silage that they have to have the silage in front of them almost all the time. And they all have to have head space so that they can all get in at the same time. So that reduces competition. So it's really much more a case of grazing as they would out in a field, rather than everybody rushing in at once to get a feed that's all gone after half an hour. So it was a much more natural way of feeding them. And one of the side effects that we didn't really expect was that they then went on to have a much more natural sort of birth pattern. And they lambed far more often through the daylight hours and at sunset and sunrise, rather than in the dead of night, which of course is the worst time to cover for labour and the hardest time to keep awake and everything. So we did find that they lambed much more naturally. And this year we've got cameras in, so we've been able to watch them remotely from the cameras. And that is exactly what they do. They get up and down and they have a bit graze, and then they go and lie down again and chew their cud. And it really does look natural, and they look really, really happy and contented.
I think that's really good. If I'd speak to one of our behaviourists, Kathy Dwyer, on that, having it as more as natural as possible, as low stress as possible. And like you say, them lambing during the day is an indication that they're low stress. Will mean they're more likely to give birth unassisted. They're more likely to give that maternal care naturally, and the lamb's going to suckle alone. It just has all these knock-on benefits afterwards, just through giving them that more natural ration and all that adequate feed space.
So if soya was so wonderful, why did you start looking for an alternative?
Having been involved with QMS for quite a few years now and sort of hearing the chat that goes on in the industry and horizon scanning, I did realise that soya is increasingly being portrayed, as we all know, as one of the bad things that we shouldn't be using. And obviously that's a lot of that is with good reason, the rainforests in Brazil and all that sort of thing. And also it's expensive and you're bringing it halfway across the world. It's not something that we should really be doing. But we'd had such an improvement by using it to the whole of our lambing experience that I really didn't want to lose it. So one day Ed was reading one of the farming magazines and he said, look at this stuff. This stuff says it's like soya. They're using it in dairy farms. And they say it does almost the same as soya. And one of the things that John Vipond told us that stuck in my head was, when you buy feed from a feed merchant, buy something that's aimed at dairy farmers, because dairy farmers are measuring their productivity on a twice daily basis. They can see exactly what the feed does to the amount of milk that the cow's producing. And what he said, and I don't know whether I should really say this, but he said the worst ingredients go into the sheep feed because nobody really measures it. And it's such a long-term thing that you don't know if you're getting the best quality or not. So his advice was to pay a little bit extra and get dairy quality stuff. So when Ed pointed this out and it said it was aimed at dairy farmers, I thought, well, I believe that then. So we had a look into it. And what it is rapeseed. It's a byproduct of rapeseed oil production. Poppy can probably explain better the process about how they get it, but it was being marketed as a direct replacement for soya. So we decided to do a trial and see if it worked, because I don't like to jump in with both feet. I like to make sure something works before I change everything.
Is it a direct replacement, Poppy?
For straight soya, it can be used in the same way. I mean, it's never going to be like for like. It has lower protein content than straight soya. However, I believe more of it is bypass. So in this context, in late pregnancy, you feed it in a similar sort of way. So Kate, you would have been feeding it 100 grams per lamb carried for soya, whereas you'd be feeding it in the equivalent way. And from what I gather from your trials, it hasn't. You've achieved the equivalent results. So in that context, it is a replacement for soya.
And your animals, you were coming up with the same results, essentially, Kate.
Yeah, so having done the trial with John, we were very aware of how we'd done that. You know, you have to sort the ewes into different groups. They have to be randomly sorted. They were all twin-bearing ewes. They were all in good condition when we started. And I measured quite a lot of things. I measured their condition score before they went in the shed, and then after they'd lambed. I measured the lamb weights at birth, and then we did them again 8 weeks later. We looked at what colostrum they had, noted down any sort of deficiencies with colostrum or any problems with suckling or the lambs standing up or anything like that. And given all those results, really came to the conclusion that we could replace the soya with the Neolac and there would be no side effects or no bad effects. And in fact, the 8 week weight, I think the Neolac lambs were slightly heavier, not much, but slightly heavier. So I've got no compunction about completely changing over to Neolac next year and ditching the soya.
One of the big concerns about soya, obviously, Poppy, is the fact that most folk assume it's coming from South America. It's coming from a long way away. You've got food miles built into that, albeit agricultural food miles. If it's coming from oilseed rape, I mean, certainly where I live in Aberdeenshire, the spring, this entire area is just skyry yellow, because it's oilseed rape everywhere. Is it a sustainable crop if suddenly, Scotland sheep farmers think, yeah, I'm going to go down this route?
Yeah, I think there's two elements to it. It's local, it's produced in northeast Scotland, this product in particular, and also it's a byproduct. So therefore, the resource use efficiency of the crop itself, because the driver of the production is oil production, and this is a byproduct of it. So therefore, it's much more efficient to be able to utilise that crop in effective, cost-effective ways on other farms. So in that context, I would say it is more sustainable.
There was another product that was mentioned in the context of this Monitor Farm project, Sopralin. How was that used?
Go ahead, Poppy.
As Kate would say, you can use it at half the rate to straight soya. And the reason being the protein is treated, so it's protected. More of it's protected from the rumen degradation. So more of it is that DUP, as I mentioned earlier, and then absorbed more efficiently later down the digestive tract of the ewe. So therefore, save on your feeding that bit more by feeding this protected rate soya.
But it is still soya. So although it's probably better than the straight soya because you use half as much, it is still soya. So I suppose it could be a stepping stone. If you were wanting to cut down a bit on your soya use, you could use that instead.
Health warning for that, though, is silage quality, making sure you've got really good silage quality to utilise that, because more of it's protected protein. You've still got to make sure you meet the needs of the rumen protein, the unprotected stuff. So you'd want to make sure you've got 13 or 14% crude protein in the silage first. I've seen some people fall short, and that causes issues.
We are looking around the UK at the moment the fact that there are shortages of all sorts of things. If we're having difficulty getting stuff in from overseas for all sorts of reasons, is this likely to be the way forward? We start looking for our own solutions. We start looking and saying, right, what have we got on our doorstep and how can we utilise it, even if it means we have to process it ourselves?
I 100% agree. The more we can be self-sufficient in that regards, the better. Because all the advantages Kate mentioned earlier, having to track things across the planet, the more in-house, the better. I don't know if you had anything to add there.
Just the sort of concept of a circular economy is really where I think we should all be moving in every part of our lives. I think maybe on farms we do quite a lot of it already, but there is more we can do on a local level, and I really think that that's the way the world's moving. Less waste and better and more efficient use of the resources that we've got.
You're obviously a convert to this oilseed rape byproduct. Your friends, your neighbours, etc. at the moment, are they following the same road?
I'm not sure, actually. We were one of the first ones to use it. I don't think many people had used this product for sheep before. We contacted the company before we started, and it had been used in quite a few dairy farms, and they were rolling it out with them. But of course, for the company, dairy farms would probably be a much more lucrative market, so that's where they would head first. But what we did find with the original Monitor Farm programme, and what I hope might happen with this one, is that the ideas that came forward from it did roll out round about the area. So the important part of this diet is the high quality silage. You've got to do that, and that's the bit that you have control over. So we were challenged to make high quality silage, and we'd never really bothered about what our quality of silage was before we started. But we took up the challenge. We were challenged by the community group, and we made really, really good quality silage the first year we tried it. And it's not difficult. It's just cutting it a bit earlier than you normally would when there's more nutrients in the grass. That's all it is. It's that nothing else is different. And we proved that we could do it. And we actually got second at AgriScot in the silage competition, which we were blown away with. I mean, we didn't do it for that, but it was fantastic. And then, of course, the members of the community group saw what we were doing, and one or two of them thought, well, if they can do it and get a rosette at AgriScot, then maybe I can as well. So they copied us. And actually, in the few years after the Monitor Farm programme finished, the average silage quality in the whole of Peelshire went up quite significantly because lots of people saw what was happening and copied it.
What would have prevented people beforehand cutting earlier? Is it the old farming thing of I can maybe get a wee bit more if I just hang on that wee bit longer?
That's exactly it. It's just, that's what you've always done. That's what the Monitor Farm challenge is. You know, what you've always done, it's maybe right, but it maybe isn't. And probably other people around about you can share their experiences, and that can help you. So, yeah, that's all it is.
And how do you go about convincing farmers otherwise, Poppy, that there is actually a better way?
Lay out the facts and figures in terms of what your ration's going to cost in late pregnancy, and there's your argument really, because you don't have to buy in as much feed to supplement it.
And just seeing what other people are doing, I think there's a huge amount of social science involved in farming. A lot of people don't want to be the first one to do something different, but if they see their neighbour doing it and it works for them, then they're much more likely to make that change. You know, I think a lot of farmers learn by seeing and other people's examples, and that's why the Monitor Farm programme works so well.
Is it possible to quantify how much you actually saved, either in terms of money or tonnage? Well,
that first year we did it, we only spent £700 on supplementary feeding on top of the silage for the ewes. And previously to that, it's difficult to say because we'd used our own barley, so it depends how you cost it. But we had been using several tons of barley to feed the ewes, which would be significantly more expensive than the soya. The Neolac is much, or was this year anyway, much the same price as the soya, so there shouldn't really be much difference there. And the sort of side effect of the high quality silage is that if you make enough of it, you can then use it in other classes of stock as well. So the calculation that year was that if we'd fed it to the store calves in the shed instead of the poorer quality silage and the concentrates that they'd been getting, we would have saved about £6,000.
And coming back to your PhD subject, Poppy, is mob grazing beneficial to the soil health and environment?
Well, I'm the equivalent of 6 months in so far, so I'm not going to have an answer to 6 months of a 6-year PhD, I will say. I'm hopeful that I can show that there is some effect on carbon on low carbon soils. So I'm looking at arable soils and with grass within the arable rotation. So hopefully I'll see something. I might see nothing. You never know.
That's the whole point of science. Listen, Kate and Poppy, thank you both very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kate Rowell and Poppy Frater there. If you've just found us, there is a considerable back catalogue of these QMS podcasts on a whole variety of topics. It's worth a look-see. Just see what interests you. In the meantime, I'm Mark Stephen. I hope you found this one useful.
Thank you for listening to the Quality Meat Scotland podcast. For news and to listen back to previous episodes of the podcast, visit qmscotland.co.uk. For Scotch beef, Scotch lamb and specially selected pork recipe videos and inspiration, visit www.scotchkitchen.com or follow Scotch Kitchen on Facebook, Instagram or Twitter. Thank you for listening to the Quality Meat Scotland podcast. For news and to listen back to previous episodes of the podcast, visit qmscotland.co.uk. For Scotch beef, Scotch lamb and specially selected pork recipe videos and inspiration, visit www.scotchkitchen.com or follow Scotch Kitchen on Facebook, Instagram or Twitter.